Yeah, there are a lot of headlines lately.
Silly.
Ronnie Screwvala is
Completely out of
the
context.
wealthiest entrepreneur.
I wouldn't want you to even want to complete the sentence. It's completely silly, busy, and false. Every third day, our Prime Minister is meeting one new head of state, and they're all coming here. He's not going too many places. They're all coming here. Diversified today, if you ask me. There's an entire space of data analytics, data science, digital learning, product management. Then there's the entire ML part, which is machine learning, artificial intelligence, and whatever else. Artificial intelligence, I know it is the buzzword right now, but it is where everyone is going, but we need to get to a lot more basic. If you don't do something at a particular point in time, and that gets missed by a lot of people, and that to me is more important than the art of continuously negotiating.
Ronnie, thank you so much for joining me on the show. And I think this is the third or fourth time I'm interviewing you over my career, and I never get tired of it because every time I come, there's something new. And in fact, now it's been 3 or 4 years since I've interviewed you. You've had a couple of movies, you've had a large investment in upGrad, you've raised your stake. There's so much that you keep doing.
Yeah.
And look at this office. The last time I interviewed you was Worli.
Yep.
And now I've come to this incredible office where I think the average age your team told me was 26.
That high, is it? Okay.
It's amazing. And I was told
just
that...
as a correction, upGrad is my baby for the longest period of time, along with my co-founder. So it's not an investment as far as I'm concerned. It's pretty much like my first 15 years were in media, and my next 20 years are in learning and upskilling and education.
Yes, of course.
The binding force, the horizontal that keeps it all going is our Swades Foundation.
Of course. And we're going to talk about that, of course, because
so
the impact you've
made... in my
made...
lighter vein. Some people play golf, I make movies.
Ronnie, I wonder what you do for fun and entertainment, because you're constantly sort of being entrepreneurial and productive with your time.
But isn't that fun?
That's fun.
So
that's fun.
A beach and a
Do you
margarita
play a
is more fun, you
sport?
think?
Do you play a sport? Do you ever lie on a beach and just stare?
Actually, we have a 3-month kabaddi season, which I enjoy. I almost feel like I'm on the field with our team. So it's very nice.
Yeah.
It's very participative.
So Ronnie, we'll start with the start and the fact that you started with an element of scarcity in your life. You were in a joint family. You've said this story before where I think 15, 16, 17 family members shared a kind of room. The bathroom was not sort of private, etc. Now, there are a lot of people who come from scarcity in this country.
Yeah.
But they don't do what you do, achieve what you achieve. Of course, there's luck and all of that. I'm not saying no. But what do you think is the differentiator that you have as a human being that has brought you here?
No, I don't think it can be defined as differentiated and that somebody doesn't do. Everyone has their own milestone of what they necessarily do. Serendipity plays a lot of it, more than luck actually, because serendipity is a powerful force of just being very active and being in multiple places and multiple times. So that twice or thrice in your life, when you're in the right place, the right time, it can catch you. So you've got to plan it in a particular manner, and there's no science to that. I think my relentless approach from day one, the fact that I keep saying here today to young entrepreneurs is that if you don't have a sense of entitlement, you can go very far.
Yeah.
And I think today, even I was doing a school graduation, and I think the only 8 minutes for me, and I know the normal themes have been stay curious, stay smart, but the level of entitlement people have today actually decides a lot of how far they can go. And I know it sounds very simplistic in the way I'm putting it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it was. The first 20 years of my life, I had lots of expectations, very low entitlement. And they're two very different worlds. So if you come from a frugal background, you stay frugal your entire life.
Yeah.
If you don't think that base camp, you're entitled to a funding, you're entitled to find the right place, the right time, you're entitled to have tailwinds.
Just because you're working hard.
Yeah. And I think, working hard is a whole new definition where so many unnecessary controversies have happened there. Because at the end of the day, each one has to find their own measure. There's no dictated one that if you're not doing 18 hours a day, doesn't mean that you're not working hard. But at the same time, people are switched on. So I may be switched on 17 to 18 hours a day. That doesn't mean that the tenacity of work has to go. So Just to answer your question very directly, I think the early days just gave me such a strong sense of non-entitlement that stands in very good stead for the long
And you know, at that time, there may have been times when you were growing up and you had that scarcity and you sort of had to fight for literal space in the home. You may have
privacy,
felt,
actually, yeah, because privacy is something. Yeah.
right? And you're a teenager, you're growing up, you know, teenagers need their privacy.
Yeah, but there were also opportunities in that because both my aunts and my mom in the joint family used to teach the piano.
Yeah.
So we had these gorgeous young women who used to come to learn the piano. So, and for me, that was a dating opportunity. So the privacy, lack of privacy.
So basically, you find opportunity in everything. Let's just say that.
Why not?
But, you know, at certain times, you may have been frustrated as a teenager that you want your space, you want more. You may have been a little more aspirational at the time.
I have to say that didn't come about.
No?
No, I think today, just because we've had it, we feel that way. So if I had to cut back and go back in life, and I can easily say, I wish when I was young I had a little bit more privacy. But at that stage, no, I didn't think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Because if you don't have it, you don't think about it.
You don't think about it. Correct. But yet, you had big dreams and you had big aspirations. I think from a young age, you were always trying to find ways to make money, organizing events. You know, also being Parsi, how did that contribute to your upbringing, Ronnie? I mean, it was all a part of your upbringing. But
I'm very happy being an Indian. I'm very proud and happy. I'm actually equally proud of being a Parsi. I don't think genes needs to take that level of credit, because if I generalize and say yes, the level of ethics, the level of just the level of giving, the level of balanced existence, the level of empathy that I think the Parsi community brings to the table. We're very ambitious people, but with a very 360-degree approach. Well, I'm not going to just do it only for money, but there's a sense of giving back and whatever else. I think those family values played a long part in my role. But look, if I wasn't even a Parsi, I think just my parents' influence in that very lower middle class upbringing, I think was a very strong one. And sure, community and whatever plays a role. But I don't think that would be called out today. But it gave me the roundedness of the community's aspect of giving back and looking at things with a little bit more of a holistic point.
okay. And you started with FMCG, toothbrushes. And I think somewhere down the line between selling UTV and starting upGrad, you also tried to go back to the FMCG sector for a short while. And
no, I didn't go back. I explored what I would want to do in there and then chose education. There were two things that I was looking at, but yes.
And then from FMCG to media, how does one traverse in that way?
Well, I don't think I've traversed it, because manufacturing toothbrushes for me was at that time existential. I was trying to find something, because I decided I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wasn't very good at implementing somebody else's vision, so I had to go find that out. But I didn't have a bank balance, and I had a little bit of a low risk appetite. And therefore, a transaction or a B2B approach to things worked out pretty well. So I think transitioning from that to cable TV was again one of those very challenging times, which I think today, if you look at that, if I can bring it into the modern context today, where a lot of people ask, you need domain expertise to switch. I think less and less. I think less and less today, because there's a fair amount of plethora of knowledge and information that we didn't have at that stage, that you do have at this stage. And you can be a generalist somewhere, you can be a specialist somewhere else. So I think at that stage, it was a natural transition, because I was looking for opportunities where I felt my entrepreneurial skills could be into place. And you know, when you asked in the beginning, I had big dreams. I think that also, is just as a word of caution for everybody, because it's nice to say you have big dreams, but actually they're not big. They're dreams at a particular stage. And the scale of it goes iteratively. If it's suddenly something that you think way beyond your scope, the ability necessarily. So I know people have a thing that think big, and dream big in that context. But it's a nice saying, but I think it means that you need to think about it a lot more practically also. Because if you don't do that, then you're going to be kind of lost.
But you've always been able to find the gap in a market, right? Whether it was cable TV, whether it's upskilling now, which is really the need of the hour and wasn't necessarily as necessary when you started it.
Yeah.
And you kind of identify the
So
gaps.
it's find and create, right? Because when you find, then you need to create it.
And the ability to scale is quite amazing with you. You identify the gap and then you're able to scale. You know, and that's with everything that you sort of get it. Even Swades.
Yeah.
I mean, the impact is huge. It's not a small impact.
Yeah, but I do want to say we started Swades, before that was called Share, and for about 15 years it was very small.
Yeah.
A, because we just didn't have the resources, we were on borrowed money, we were building a media company, etc. And it's only when I divested to UTV, when we divested UTV to Disney is when we felt, where do we go scale? And both Zarina and my wife looked at, now we can afford it, so why don't we go for it?
Yeah.
So I think each one has their timing in life, what you want to necessarily do.
Yes, but like I said, you're able to find a gap. You're able to sort of
So there I would just like to say,
be creative
again,
and scale.
Clearly for people, finding it is a good one. Then you have to create it, because if it's a gap, you actually need to market make. And I think part of my ability on some of these, and I've failed in the equally amount of times, but at least the ones where I've succeeded is finding, creating, and then scaling.
You had this negotiation with Disney. You sold a baby that you nurtured for a couple of decades, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, people think also that, oh, he sold it, he became a billionaire, but there's blood, sweat and tears for...
Yeah, but I wasn't a billionaire based on what I sold at Disney. That I can
Correct.
tell you. So I think any media reports today that ascribe wealth creation to my media days, it was my starting part.
Yeah.
But it was nowhere near the context that is being blown out of proportion with some silly headlines.
Yeah, there are a lot of headlines lately.
Silly.
Ronnie Screwvala is
Completely out of
the
context.
wealthiest entrepreneur.
I wouldn't want you to even want to complete the sentence. It's completely silly, busy, and false.
Okay. All right. Well, but you've done well. I think we can agree on that. And well, better than a lot of people in the country.
Yeah, I just want to put the context that the value creation actually has come more from what I've done after UTV than before UTV.
Yeah. But this was a major negotiation for you. Take me through how you handled it. Because, I mean, Disney was this giant, right? And you're an Indian company.
Just again, for your viewers, etc., I'd like to say a few things. One, firstly, it wasn't a protracted negotiation. It wasn't too much of a negotiation in the first place.
Yeah.
But let me put that into context. When you're looking at divesting, if you are the person who's trying to find an exit, you're going to be at 1/3 the value. And I think the Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal made a comment the other 2 days back, and I think this whole community that we have is very sensitive, because all he was trying to do is make an inspirational comment, and then you have to be a little bit instigative when you're making something like benchmarking it with somebody. And just everyone went, but how dare you? I mean, no, I'm at a forum, but there are 5,000 young founders that need to make their comment, then it should be in a rally up from that point of view. So all I would just say was, if you're looking at a negotiation and if you started it, you're at the back end of it. So I think with me, the thought was not to exit. The second part is Disney was already entrenched. We had a 7-year-long relationship and a partnership. That helps because there's a lot of mutual trust and a lot of mutual respect. The second is who pops the question first. And I think from their point of view, it was them saying, why don't we do that? And me quickly then reviewing it over 30 days and figuring out that it made eminent sense and not being emotional. So I think for a lot of people who say, it's my baby, of course it is. But every daughter gets married, every son gets married. That doesn't mean you lose them forever in that context, but they go off and have a different life partner. So I think when you're not emotional about something, it hasn't originated from you. Your ability to be able to get it in the right place is much better. So I think those were the critical points. A lot of trust and respect. They popped the question. It was the right time for what we wanted to do. And actually, therefore, if anything is a long negotiation, it's a problem. And I think today, I'll give you multiple examples where people don't get the sense of that timing is very, very important in a negotiation. And I've seen people just procrastinate on something or feel, if you made this offer, I've got to make it a better offer. And that's wrong. And I think a lot of people lose out on a deal. I just read the other day about this e-com express being bought by delivery, right? I mean, it was valued at $1 billion, but I'm sure the founder must have had a tough time because his investors must have said, no, we must get a higher value. And then 8 months later, you don't have it. So a lot of negotiation is based on timing and acceptance of a decision. And the number of hours and the number of time we actually procrastinate and take longer because you just feel, no, it's my baby. I could have been easily emotional. No, this is not the right value. This is not. At some stage, it has to make sense and you go forward because it could be a zero-sum game if you don't do something at a particular point in time. And that gets missed by a lot of people. And that to me is more important than the art of continuously negotiating.
Let's put it this way. The expectation that you had when you first started off talking to Disney about a potential sale and where you ended up, what was the difference?
There wasn't too much of a difference, actually. There wasn't too much of a difference. Okay. But again, I'll tell you that because we were also a listed company. So there was already a benchmark price for it. So maybe that could have been one of the reasons why.
Yeah. Do you feel like a lot of promoters and a lot of entrepreneurs that start companies now, instead of thinking the long game or sort of sustainable growth, they're thinking, make, create, sell out, become a unicorn ASAP? Do you think that that's becoming a bit of a hindrance in terms of strategizing and sort of creating a long-term vision for a company?
The last part I'll come to in a second, but
yeah.
If you ask me, do a lot of entrepreneurs think that way? No, because then they're not really entrepreneurs in that sense of the word. Has the media influence and this 20, 30 investors that have created a market where it became a unicorn-y approach to it? Yes, I think that's created some wrong benchmarks across. But I don't think 99% of the people want to get in there and sell. Yes, there has been enough of those comments, and I heard another conversation on television where somebody said, oh, but you're already thinking of the exit plan, whatever else. Actually, that's not true. And you need to have created a business and run it to be able to make comments.
You feel like that's more of a media sort of creation?
Yeah, I think people from the outside, the most toughest thing in life is to be an entrepreneur. The one tougher thing than that is to stay an entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
Right? So, and it is a lonely job, whether you like it or not. Not because it's lonely in that sense, and it's got its own glamour, but it is. Yeah. And the decisions and the choices you make weigh down pretty heavily. So, for that, I have full support and empathy for everyone.
Yeah.
Now, you can get misguided, but a lot of that misguiding also comes from the funding that comes on your door.
Yeah.
I mean, in a unicorn, most of the time, you actually raise $50 to $100 million. But 4 or 5 people in a room have got together and valued you at a billion. That does not make you a chest-thumping moment. At the end of the day, the risk capital from their part of you is 50 to 100 million. Not small, not big either. So I just think this whole concept that it sounds like unicorn sounds like $1 billion. That's yes. 3 people valued you at X. Somebody else valued you at Y. But I would say today, people are interested in building for the long term. 30 years back, you did 2 jobs in your life. 15 years back, you did 4 jobs in your life. Now you could be changing a job every 2 or 3 years. So that way, in a similar sense, people can become serial entrepreneurs in the sense of becoming one entrepreneur, moving out of a business in 10 years or whatever else. Yeah. I mean, I've been classified as a serial entrepreneur. I don't see myself as, I set out to do media to exit from that. It just happened in a particular point in time.
So when you exited, I mean, you still sort of obviously continued the love for storytelling. You had RSVP, and somewhere I read that RSVP means basically was indicating that people in the industry, in the film industry and entertainment industry, do not RSVP.
Do not RSVP at all.
And therefore, this was RSVP, which is really brilliant actually when you think about it. Yeah. When I realized what it meant.
Yeah, well, one of our colleagues in the place actually came up with that. I mean, RS because of my initials were rung true, and then yes, you're right. Nobody in the industry really RSVPs, and if they do it very selectively. And for someone like me, and we get 400 mails a day, and not all are connected, but I think I've grown up in an environment where a lot of time I used to write those letters and never get a reply back. That today I go out of my way to respond, even if it's saying no, because no is such an easy thing to say. Most people make a big deal of it. But yeah, in this industry, I just find people don't feel they need to reply.
Yeah.
But in a fun way. It's not a condescending comment at all.
And I'm sure if anyone from the industry watched this, they would laugh and be like, yeah, that's me. But where do you think this love for storytelling came from? Because this is clearly not one of those places,
My theatre days.
unless I'm wrong, that one makes a lot of money in your situation.
Yeah. RSVP, no, it's a completely passion project.
That's
on
what.
that one.
So,
And I think it's yeah. So I would say, if you ask me if I had to find a route for it, it would be my theatre days, which was when I did that as a hobby, English theatre.
were you trying to be a television anchor? Were you a television anchor at
Yeah, I
some
was
point?
a television anchor.
Yeah.
I needed desperately pocket money. You come from a lower middle class home, you need pocket money. So I used to do theatre, English theatre on the weekend,
Yeah.
and television hosting for Doordarshan.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
yes.
And that was
so,
a 500 rupee check you got every Wednesday. That was huge.
oh my. So, this was a weekly check?
Yeah, it was called The Young World. Then I did a program called The Magic Lamp. All of these are extinct today. Getting a copy out of that at Doordarshan is the thing. But I think if you ask me, the creative germ was theatre days that I did, English theatre in Mumbai.
Okay.
Yeah, if I'm sitting here and having the self-confidence, not having had a great amount of degrees and studying myself personally, I would say it's because of theatre.
What kind of student were you?
In school, I think I was so there were two parts to school, because I think, again, in my first part, I used to go to a school called Dunn's Institute, which I still am quite attached to in many ways. And it was a lower middle class school in that context. So their studying was a lot more energetic, ambition, because your parents were paying fees and you had to come out and you had to get the grading. So it was a lot more participative. I think by the time I joined Cathedral, that sense of little bit of entitlement comes in, because you've joined a sort of a high premium school.
But how did you make that switch? Given the background, Ronnie.
I think my dad moved from a job to a managing director job. So the socio-economic standard in our family changed, and we moved from Grant Road to Breach Candy. In a rented apartment, and I think they just felt I need to go to, according to them, a more established school. So, and I got into Cathedral. So, but I think that's a little bit of the arrogant phase of your life, right? You're in a good school, suddenly everyone's arrogance in that term, and that arrogance I took to college. So, at that particular point in time, you could jump a year if you did very well in school, which I did in the last standard, and you can go straight into inter-college. And then I flunked there because the arrogance was carried forward, right? So I had a flunk year in inter-college in commerce because I was an arrogant person, having thought, I don't need to attend any classes.
Wow. Okay.
And then I finished my BCom. But outside of that, how am I been as an academic student? Pretty bad. How have I been a student of life?
No, but you skipped a year.
Yeah, but I still finished it, and then I didn't do anything else. Then the crossroad of doing an MBA, doing a chartered accountancy went away. So as I said, student of life, very good. Student of academics, very low.
Okay. Coming back to the media and storytelling, you've been part of the industry for a while now, and you've seen...
Well, out of it for the last 12 years, but yeah.
But you still have movies that have been made, and
Yes.
you're still sort of got a ear to the ground, I would imagine. So my point is that you've seen few transitions happen in the industry. This one is quite unusual and quite different, because for the first time, sort of in the last few years, star power isn't working as well as it did if the script and story doesn't support it. There are sort of unknown storytellers and unknown actors. A more democratic atmosphere, if you will, even though people keep tooting about nepotism, it doesn't work if the story is not working. In fact, these star kids, a lot of them are getting highly trolled, actually. So my point is that where is it at today in your assessment?
So I don't think we should sit down and write anything off.
Yeah.
You know, in the 10 years of UTV, when we built our library of 84 movies, a Wednesday stood out as much in a star-studded year from that perspective also. So there are certain movies. So I would not say star power doesn't work as a sweeping statement. The main context is the next generation that has come about, it doesn't look at theatrical going habits as a very different one. So we just need to understand that the environment has changed to quite an extent, right? There's no compelling reason today to go to the theater to watch a movie from a big screen experience point of view. So if you look at that as the core basics, and then you'll have that. You will have some where you'll suddenly find a lot of people going, but there's a momentum. But if anyone who used to go to the movie theater 12 times, they now go 5 times, 4 times. The people who are going 4 times go once, and the people who are going less than that never go. So that whole ecosystem has changed. So, and by the way, I do want to say that that star power that was there before had a lot to do with television. Because if you see the younger stars today, they're not penetrated into mass India because it never went. It was a question of theatrical that went onto television that made you an absolute national star. That whole TV viewing is gone because now you're going straight to OTT and you're not on television, which is that 400, 500 million viewership base. That's absent. So I would not write off that star power doesn't work. Content and story always did, but you used to go there with a certain level of spectacle. Just your expectations for why you want to spend 4 hours in a movie theater. And that's also become long, right? Because the movie theater's economics is challenged. So they put 20, 25 minutes of ads. Who wants to sit for 25 minutes and watch ads? So it's a longer experience, a longer interval, you know, all of the rest that go with a lot of advertisement put in there. So they've actually made the experience a little longer.
Yeah.
That's one. Second, I think storytelling has got pretty sharp. And actually, if you look at it, it's got better because of the OTT platforms, right? So the serial writing is a lot more sharper, a lot more taut. You can make it a wider audience or a narrow audience, and you don't need to have the tension of a Friday night opening context. You couldn't do that on television because television was a mass medium. There's no such thing as appealing to the 100 million. It was about the 400 million people, and therefore the soap opera, and therefore it still works. So you have advertising supported television today that still works for the largest middle denominator, I would say, not the common denominator, but the middle denominator. And then we got the OTTs, which can straddle everything. So films today as a grammar and a long form of 1 hour, 30 minutes is a challenge format. It's not here. Disney has sort of been, in the last decade, one of the most creative production houses when you're looking at movies, and they're challenged in that context. For them, animation stories. And people are saying, I love Lion King 10 years back, but today, even as a Mufasa, it doesn't work to that way. Or Snow White or Cinderella redone. So if you look at that entire element, and then the next generation today is looking for interactive. They're much more into their games. So I think water has found a new level. So we shouldn't put a coffin into that. I think just everyone needs to align themselves. The problem of the crisis, if you look at it today, is the economics of it. That nobody wants to face the reality that now if this is changed, your economics has to change.
Which means, for example, what you're paying to,
All
let's say the
economics.
top tier
All economics
actors,
has to change. All
this has
economics
to
has
sort of
change.
be revisited.
All economics has changed, but I don't think I think the freshness there is lost a little bit, acceptance is lost. Creativity is definitely challenged to quite an extent, because when you're confused, you're not self-confident, and that's the worst place in which to vision and do storytelling, right? Because if you're lack of confidence, then you're trying to ape, you're trying to figure out what do you think the audience, and sometimes now it was okay to take a year and a half to make a movie. Today, by the time you start, and if you still say, I'm going to take a year and a half to make a movie, the audiences have moved on to a different taste. So that whole element and bracket of how do you make something that's big in 6 months is not that easy to do.
But for example, the South films are working in a pretty big way. A lot of the films, right? And then you have a film like Chava, which is a very sort of patriotic film, if you will.
Yeah.
Which also does raging business.
Yeah.
Why are the South films doing so well?
No, I think if you look at it, they've done consistently well.
Yes.
But Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu have been always indexed 3 times more in television viewing for the last 20 years since the 1990s.
No, absolutely. But I'm saying, why are they doing so well here? Like in Maharashtra, places where they never...
See, the approach to watching without what you thought was a dubbed and not an alien is no longer alien, because the story meshing they've done is quite national. It is quite international. They've invested in special effects. So if you're looking at an action genre and if it's executed differently, that dubbing element doesn't count. And you're right, there I'm saying if I didn't know a star and I know a star now, that can work. So I think that is part of, it's not that their storytelling is very much different in that context, but they've managed to capture the genres in a good manner.
Yeah.
But if you ask me today, it is, I don't think it's easy to define this.
Yeah.
If I had to go back and build something in content today, I would need to take 2 years off everything to understand the consumer all over again. And I think we're missing that. And right now, there's more panic, lack of confidence, hesitancy with false bravado.
Interesting. Do you also feel like it's been democratized more because of OTT platform?
I think everything is democratized more today.
Because of social media also.
Everything is democratized. Everything is democratized in so many other things. Every restaurant is democratized because 80% of the people that eat from your restaurant is eating at home. So why is the storytelling or the movie industry special? That's the other problem. We all think this is very unique. It's only here. No, you look at anything else, anywhere else, that's what it is.
I think also storytelling generally, for whatever, whether it's a product, service, entertainment, whatever it may be, has taken a totally different turn. And then there's the Gen Z, and then there are the millennials, and then there are the boomers.
But I would tell you that if you're disciplined and if you can write a good series, it can appeal to a lot of people across the cross-section.
If you had to do a movie today, or you had to do a show for an OTT platform, I understand it's a generic question, but what do you think you would put your money behind? A well-written OTT or well-written film?
One, because I think I have to understand the audience. The other one, because the economics of that doesn't make sense. You don't own the IP, the platform owns the IP, been there, done that. In the 1990s, when we used to run UTV and the television, the broadcasters used to own the IP. So that's just my personal point of view. It's not worth the effort. You don't own the IP. You've got 5 or 6 talented young executives who have a very clear brief, who have their own challenges of their own environment and their own bosses to account to, that are actually creating and having a creative interference. So the ownership is low because it's not your creativity, it's not X's creativity, it's a humble jumble of creativity and negotiation. So it's not fun. And if it's not fun, I'd step out of it.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, now let's get to upGrad, which is so exciting. And it's such an exciting time for a company and an education company like upGrad. You've seen amazing growth right from the get-go. But tell me where you stand at today.
I think we stand at very, very early stage. I think my biggest disappointment in myself is the fact that we've not been able to open up this market. This is a 100x market. I think it's a very high impact market. Every problem in India or in a country like Vietnam, where we also operate in others, is to solve for scale. And I think we haven't been able to get to that scale of operation at all, because you have almost anyone and everyone in their adult life that needs to every 3 to 4 years upskill themselves in some form or the other. It's almost mandatory. And the fact that we've not been able to get that out is really the work in progress. Now, while we're doing that, I think from my point of view, an upGrad is obviously one where we're in the online higher education space. But preempting careers of tomorrow is where the fun is. A little bit of in the media days when one used to always be ahead. If you weren't ahead of the curve, you weren't ahead of the curve with your audience, then the chance of success would be that. And it's nice for people to say, we used to back HUD-K movies, but that's not, just HUD-K wouldn't have hacked it, right? So there was a sense that we could feel aware of. And that's why today, if you asked me that question a little earlier, I wouldn't, because I don't understand what's the next big thing in media. But here in education, I think the whole shift that is happening, his aspirations have gone very different. Rural aspirations have gone very different. I know people look at it as a job context, but a lot of people are quite happy to be self-employed and want to go somewhere. I think the beauty about what we're doing in online education is that there is intermittent gratification, which means that if you did school or college, you had to wait for your 3 years before you felt, what's my report card? How have I done? Will I get a job? Will I get placed? But today, when you're in the online space, every day when you're learning something, you can come back to work the next day and create an impact and actually have a different perspective on that.
How many modules do you have now?
Modules, as in?
As in how many courses, so roughly
No, I mean,
across
at
the
any
board?
given stage, we have almost 150,000 active learners. We've had about almost 10 million people that have gone through us and done some sort of the other course. And it's across long form and short form. Our courses vary from 5 days for a boot camp on a certification course to 3 years for a doctorate.
Yeah. Where would you say you're seeing the real interest for your courses and for your modules? What kind of sort of categories? Machine learning, as in, where are you seeing the interest?
No, I think it's diversified today, if you ask me. There's an entire space of data analytics, data science, digital learning, product management. Then there's the entire ML part, which is machine learning, artificial intelligence, and whatever else. Artificial intelligence, I know it is the buzzword right now, but it is where everyone is going, but we need to get to a lot more basic. But I think people are looking for specialization versus generalization. Some people are looking for generalization where they've been a specialist. That whole ecosystem is also. So to me, I see in the next 5 years, a lot of people will have 2 jobs. Not because they're cheating on one job and the other, but just that's the vocation of how the economics will work. And that's the way the next generation will feel, because they want to be multidimensional versus being unidimensional. So I think if I'm laying the core of upGrad, it's more because I'm looking at multidimensional people in the workforce versus unidimensional people.
Absolutely, but let's go to university, right?
Yeah.
Even at the university level, now you're seeing there's a lot of joblessness that's coming out of university.
Yes.
That wasn't the case.
Yeah.
Even 10 years ago.
Correct.
You know, university campuses, there were certain campuses were guaranteed. You go to that university, scouts come, you get a job.
That's in the post-graduation sector. But
Right.
so I would say 75 out of 100 people in India still don't get an undergraduation right now because they don't see that ROI or that connection to that. So what it has done is alienated it. And I think a little bit of the problem we're trying to solve at upGrad is if you haven't done it before, you can now do it, but work and do it. And therefore the relevance of that is becoming higher.
Yeah.
But I think the job market is never going to match the learning and skilling market. There's always going to be a mismatch. And that's going to get filled in by self-employment and entrepreneurship.
Yeah. So what kind of growth do you think you're going to have with upGrad over the next couple of years? Because now you can't even talk 10 years anymore, not for jobs, not for anything, like the next 2 to 3 years.
See, I think
Given people's sort of desire to upskill at all ages, actually.
it's not about what the sector can bring. I think for an organization where the basic foundation of learning experience has got to be very strong, because it's not one of those get a student in, put him in front of a Zoom camera and off you go. So to us, a steady state growth of 40% is very good, because that actually means at every given stage we're laying a foundation. Because, you know, you ask a hospital chain how fast do you want to grow, and they'll say 300% a year. I don't think you'll want to go and get admitted in that hospital, right?
Yeah.
So there are certain sectors where you will find that. In an airline sector, it's perfectly fine if they buy the next 100 or 400 Boeings and fly them because there's an SOP of a different nature. But in things like healthcare, education, and skilling, there's a certain gross foundation that you need to lay at every given stage.
How do you make decisions about what kind of content you want in upGrad in terms of the courses and modules?
We listen to our learners all the time. I mean, I personally do webinars on weekends to just listen in on people, but almost all our people, whether they're creating the programs or whether they're part of our learning experience or the delivery people, they're constantly listening in. That's one. And I think the debates we had internally of what are the careers of tomorrow? What are we really serving for? How are we preempting the trends?
So let me ask you that. What do you think the careers are of tomorrow?
It'll keep changing, and I'll give you the best example. We have our Atlas University, which is a skills university in BKC, and we'd invited about the head of McKinsey, head of the Big Four, and a few other people. There was 8 people, and they came in there, and there were 200 students on the other side. And the vice chancellor, the president, Dr. Indushani, said, you know, I've just invited these people here because they're going to tell you what the careers of tomorrow are. So this one young girl raised her hand and said, excuse me, ma'am, but that's not going to work out. We'll have to tell them what the careers of tomorrow are.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is, because we're going to live it. So what's the point of you telling me what you thought 30 years back or what your consultancy firm thinks that way today? So I think that's really the freshness of it. And that's why when I said 2 jobs, I don't mean it facetiously. I do mean that when you're multidimensional, I personally would love to hire people who will come and work with me for 3 days and are working in this completely different industry for 3 days. Because here, most of the places and companies, you want innovation. You'll get a lot of innovation because they're thinking with you focusedly, then go out and learn other experiences. I'm going to get the benefit of that. So you see the whole ecosystem where it's going here. That is the fascinating part of being part of that ecosystem with upGrad.
What is the difference between the skill set you think is required to be an entrepreneur and to work as an incredible employee for someone?
So I think ownership is becoming more and more important when you become, because jobs are not guaranteed anymore and nobody's looking at the bottom 10% to ease out. Now people are looking at you either in the top 30% or you're dispensable. So I think nothing is a guarantee and therefore you need to have the highest level of ownership. I think the fact that I just did a workshop with about 50 of our people just now, and my first criterion was, if you're coming here and you think this is a job, it's going to be a very short-lived approach. But for you, it is a job. Now it's up to me to see how I can get you an owner. But the minute you feel that you're owning something in a high-impact sector like this, you won't worry. I won't need to have a conversation with you about sort of, life and just the balance of life and whatever else. The happiness quotient or whatever else, or work-life balance and things like that, because you'll own it. So I think from a job perspective, you don't need to be the entrepreneur in residence because it's not easy to do that, and you'll get confused. And a lot of people say, I'm looking for entrepreneurs in an organization. Actually, you're not, because then you don't want people just going out and doing their own stuff. When you're looking at being an entrepreneur, it's a completely different context, right? Because it's not just about risk and resilience and whatever else. At the end of the day, it is a very, 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 very tough element. You'll have to be very, very sharp about the decisions that you make, the choices you make. So I think entrepreneurship is a completely different context, and it's only going to get narrower and tougher from that point, right? And it's not the normal things about resilience or storytelling or ability to do that. There's so much that goes into staying the course on many things that you want to do.
Yeah.
I think the choices you make, the decisions you make, it's a very different DNA.
But tell me, in terms of the job market today, okay, so entrepreneurship, as you said, is a totally different ballgame. And you know, some people succeed, some people take longer to succeed, some people sort of have to cop out or do cop out or whatever it is.
My definition is no. Everyone can succeed in
Yeah.
that context. It's just about timing.
Yeah.
But the timing part, not as in, because if you have set yourself a timing, you're going to flop.
Yeah.
And if you just calculate on the basis that, okay, now I'm done with that. You may be done with an idea, but you can't be done with the fact that you want to be an entrepreneur the rest of your
And
life.
create something.
Yeah.
And don't keep like a job as a backup. Don't keep a timeline as a backup.
Plan B is only for business schools. Plan B in real life is a problem.
Yeah. There is a dearth of jobs now across most sectors, and of course there are the new age careers and sectors where employers say that they're not finding people. And then there are graduates who are not finding jobs. So there's a real disconnect.
Yeah, but graduate now today does not entitle you to a job, is what I'm trying to say. So I think we have
Like
to
a
be,
postgrad.
we have to be very careful about our vocabulary. You're
Yes.
right, the world has moved forward. India has moved forward.
Yeah.
We're no longer a cheap labor arbitrage country.
Yeah.
Okay, we want to focus on manufacturing, then the manufacturers be high quality, high discipline, high output, high focus approach to that. You look at the service industry, you've got GCC models coming where everyone wants to stamp up in India. They want a work ethic of a very different nature, not a BPO work ethic or another kind of work ethic. So that whole expectation there has moved to a very different level. And today, the fact that you think that if I've graduated, automatically I'm eligible to some job, no. The government is the largest employer in the country at almost 25% of the workforce. And that will always be there, and that will be a job guaranteed approach. But even that over a period of time is not going to grow as fast as the youth is going to grow. So self-employment has to be the way. And small and medium scale industries that we all ignore and don't talk about is massive. I mean, a country like India
Absolutely.
is going to be an incredible employer. We need to foster them. We don't have enough schemes to really make them viable. So you got companies that blow up $5 billion in 3 years with carelessness and whatever else. That imagine those 3-4 companies that we're talking about here that will raise that capital. If you put that into the SME sector, you'll create 10 million jobs because you've given them away, because they have a very frugal approach to manufacturing. They may not scale, but today you need that ecosystem, because if you want really, most of the large manufacturers need the SME sector to supply to them. So that's an incredible job creation. Self-employment is going to be the other one.
And also, you know, the ability of an Indian to get a job now anywhere in the West, whether it's America or Canada, which are some of the largest employers, the UK, you know, where traditionally Indians have gone. That's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
There's a protectionist sort of sentiment now
That
that's
wasn't
coming
such
in the
a
West.
large market. A lot of that was the labor market that went to the Middle East and whatever else. I think that the people that would go to the US can still go, if you ask me. It might be halved, but that was 100,000 people, but we're 1.4 billion people. So I would say in context, it's halved, but in absolute amounts, it's inconsequential.
Ronnie, would you call yourself frugal even now? Like, for example, you bought a home when you were 50. Would you say that your decision to buy into real estate or own a home was later because your requirement of liquidity was higher than others?
No, firstly, to answer your question, yeah, I do consider myself to be frugal. I think that's a value system that I've treasured for the most amount of period of time. And, you know, it's subjective what you consider to be frugal, whatever else. Maybe some other time I would have taken a train, now I take a plane. That's not the difference of frugal, because you're still looking at it in a different point of view.
It's about how much you spend in relation to what you have.
Yeah, but I think today, so that hasn't, if the value creation has been 1,000x, the up would be 2x. So I think that by definition.
Yeah, because you've not even created a building or anything. You still live in that apartment in Breach Candy, right?
Yeah. Now, just to talk about the house, I think that's also a little bit of serendipitousness, right? I mean, in the sense that, one lived in a rental place. It didn't bother me to that extent. I mean, I did own a house when I was married first, then I got separated and divorced. So that, then I stopped owning a house, and then I don't think it was relevant for me for a particular context. And then when I wanted to get a house again, I think I had a particular idea of what I wanted the house to be. So that took a little longer to afford.
Your daughter is in the social impact sector, which is amazing. She could have been a part of RSVP, she could have been part of upGrad, commercial ventures.
She could have been a part of any of that, because that's not how it works. So even in UTV, there was no such context of a succession plan. The minute I believe that's not, so this was not one of those organizations where, and you talked about, I think for her pursuing an independent task was it. So there was no optionality in that. Neither did I want it, nor did she want it. But there's no succession planning in here. Because I think I didn't do it in media either.
You've talked about privilege and scarcity and how it sort of helped you shape your values and shape who you are today. Your daughter hasn't had that scarcity and sort of lack of privilege. So how did you sort of shape her values, Ronnie?
No, I think both her mother and I have actually consistently brought that up in a manner with the same frugal environment that goes into our communication, where there's no real sense of entitlement. It wasn't a sense of being able to draw on. Sure, the fact that she could have the best of her education was something that any parent, anywhere, in any strata of life would want to do. But after that, it's been do it on your own. I'm not saying it's one of those things where you pull that down, but it's also a response of what it is, right? And I think the upbringing more than the amount of money in the bank that creates that. So if you have the value systems, maybe half Parsi value systems, that's coming back the full circle,
You've always been someone who creates value than just wealth, which is basically also kind of creating a community around you, of which is sort of enveloped into your entrepreneurship, into your growth, into your sort of future. You've done that with Swades as well. Are you now helping 1,000 villages more?
Yeah, about 2,200 villages, which will double up and triple up a lot more. I think over the next 5 years, we want to go very, very far with our not-for-profit.
Yeah, that was you tend to make an impact wherever you are, whether it is in the social impact sector, whether it's in the entrepreneurship, you're creating real value and sort of taking people along with the ride.
Yeah.
along the ride with you, which is really incredible, Ronnie. Not everyone does that. In the social impact sector, a lot of people look at it as philanthropy, give money, and that's the end of that.
Yeah.
But I
So
think you're
to us,
finding
the
a way
excitement
to...
was very, very different. I think you need to be involved because actually in this sector, especially rural India, it's like anything else. If you want to solve a problem, you need to be involved with it. You can't just have a contractor or have somebody else's vision. And I think I'm not good at building on somebody else's vision. Neither am I good at financing somebody else's vision.
No, but what do you see in rural India today with the youth? What are the aspirations? Do they all want to come to the big cities?
No.
Do they want to create more empowerment within their areas?
Yeah. I just say, we have about 400, 500 excellent scholarships kids that we have that graduate every year. And if you see them, if you hear them, just 4 weeks back, we took 7, 8 founders from here to the village.
Yeah.
And it was amazing because all of them, again, what I loved about it was a low sense of entitlement. We're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. And then they ask, so what do you want to do? Do you want to come here? Why don't you come work here? No, I want to go back to my village. I want to give back. I've come from there. I want to go back there. So I think aspirations are mixed. There are some youths that are frustrated. There are some, but overall, as I said, what they would have expected people with a job, they figured it out that I need to be self-employed. More people today, when we go to skill up, people want to do hospitality than they want to do plumbing and farm. So I think agriculture has become cool in rural to a certain extent, but in many places become cool. To have multiple crops, to be a farmer is no longer oh my God, my dad's a farmer, but I'm not.
Really?
Yep. It's not sweeping, but it's definitely rising.
Sports, kabaddi, very exciting. And you've talked about sports being the next sort of realm of consumption for viewership and sort of advertising and all of that. Tell me about kabaddi.
Yeah, but if you look at the media sector today, what
Yeah.
you would have otherwise seen is broadcasting and advertising revenues. I think between sport and games and interactive, that's actually the larger part of it.
In fact, my son was telling me, he was 13, that when I ride on him I'm very particular about video games and that fear of sort of getting locked into that. He's like, the video gaming industry is double the size.
Oh, it's double the size, triple the size,
Triple the size of
movie
movie industry, right?
Yep. And it's a paying sector and it's a B2C sector. So it's like, there's no advertising in that. So it's even more of a situation where it's a direct B2C.
Will you be looking at more sports? What about an IPL team, Ronnie?
I think that moment has passed now. It's too expensive. It's too evolved. And to me, the kabaddi was to be part of something where one could disrupt.
Yeah.
And cricket, it'll be going out there and sitting in the stands and cheering the team, which is a nice sense, but not a great sense.
So basically, your goal is disruption.
I'd like to. I enjoy it. Yeah.
Get into a place where,
I enjoy it.
which is almost like an underdog sector,
I enjoy that.
not serviced, and you get in there and sort of bring your own
I enjoy that. I enjoy that a lot.
leadership to it.
Yeah.
What is
Half the time, it's also very, very tough, right? Because then you need people to take people along to build on that on a very tough journey, and that's not easy.
Do you think you're going to be investing in more sports?
Actually, cricket does command the largest part of it. Just kabaddi was this outlandish situation. So instinctively, I would say not. But I think it'll grow over a certain period of time.
And it is also the national sport, so there is an element of sort of...
Yeah, I think people look at this saying, oh, every sport can become a league and give you this thing. The main point is in India, actually, we're not a sporting country.
Yeah.
I know we're a cricket country, but we're not a sporting country. I wanted to take 120 young kids to football training to Germany. We had a 4-year scheme for that sports training. And I had a big problem with the parents because none of them actually wanted to accept that their kids could become a sports as a career option. They would still keep saying, but when will he do his MBA? And I'm saying, he's not going to do his MBA. He's going to become a footballer. He's going to play in Spain or he's going to play X. So I think we're not yet that kind of a sporting country. Plus, I think our DNA of competitive training that should come in universities and college actually needs to go to the next level.
Ronnie, how do you compound your money? Like, you don't invest in real estate. I don't think you're a real estate investor.
My compounding is by investing in myself.
Meaning, are you an active investor in the stock markets?
I'm active in nothing. I'm active in investing in myself. I'm not active in any other part of it.
You've stayed away from the markets. You've stayed away from investing in other people, just in yourself.
Yeah, I'm not at all active in the stock market. I would say 15 years back, my dad would sit me down and said, how could you just own shares of one company called UTV? What about Cipla? What about Tata Motors? What about Telco?
Yeah.
I'd say, no.
But actually, that's a very Parsi thing, right?
Yes.
A lot of Parsis have owned
That's why I mentioned all the Tata companies in that context. But no, so the markets.
Tell me about Trump and what you think of Trump is doing. What do you think Trump is doing to the world today? And it's kind of put a real spoke into the plans that a lot of people had out of India.
I think he's doing a little bit of acupuncture. First you pinprick, then you needle, then you take the needle really in and then you twist it. Look, firstly, I think to comment on another country, and he's an elected president of that country, and he won by a substantial majority. So you asked for it, you got it, is the first thing that I would say. I think.
But that was okay till it was not doing damage elsewhere, right?
No, I think that water has to find its own level. So I think if you're looking that if I was elected on the basis of nationalism, then I'm going to take this country and I'm going to be self-centered about that, and that then the ambition of what he was elected for, he's carrying on that mandate. I think the leadership style today of the unexpected, or what I would say the unpredictability. I mean, the core part of one word that would define Trump would be unpredictable. Now that's a powerful tool. In leadership, actually, I don't think being unpredictable is a bad thing. It's actually a good thing because it keeps everyone around you on your toes. A lot of people in leadership feel, they got to inspire, they got to get consensus, they got to do this, they got to do that. But some of the real people who've managed to do incredible stuff, are people who've actually been unpredictable. You walk in a meeting room and you don't know what Jeff Bezos is going to say. That's unpredictability. So he's taken it to the next level. So I think his leadership style on unpredictability is not a normal, acceptable norm that people are finding their levels with. Now, it just so happens that it's the wealthiest, most powerful nation in the world that's doing that. An unpredictable person in another place, anywhere else, would not have really moved the needle. So you're finding that in an ecosystem where you're self-elected. But I personally think it's not all bad at all. I think it's something that you're challenging people. You're putting a spanner in the wheel in many parts, and you are creating a sense of new level of innovation that will come about. It'll put people on their toes. I think there was a lot of taken for granted, a lot of personal agendas, a lot of other stuff, a lot of politics that can come in there. So I personally think it's going to be overall good for the world. I'm not talking specifically about the tariffs today. But tariffs is the beginning of accepting the fact that I'm going to tinker with the world order. But you're out there, that's why you can tinker with the world order. 2-3 countries in the world today can tinker with the world order unless they start pressing their nuclear buttons, right? So that's it. It just happens to be at that time. But I think it'll be interesting.
But do you think that's going to be hazardous for India?
No. I personally think we're going to be overall much better off because I think just our foreign policy approach in the last 5-7 years has been quite incredible and very refreshing, very strong. Second, every third day our Prime Minister is meeting one new head of state and they're all coming here. He's not going too many places, they're all coming here. So the fact that in the last 5-7 years we've made ourselves to be stable, the fact that today, in 75 years of independence, we couldn't have actually started buying oil from Russia, which was embargoed by most parts of the world, go visit Putin, come back and let him come and visit here, and yet be friends with everyone else in the world. So I think we've put ourselves as a strong, stable, reliable power. And I think that's a huge step, huge.
Ronnie, are we going to see an IPO soon? I know Temasek has invested in upGrad.
I don't know about soon part.
And now it's what? The valuation is, there are talks of 2 billion, 2.5 billion. Is that a fair number?
Yeah. Yes, but again, I'm not in the valuation part of it. It just so happens that that's what it has been done. But yeah, I mean, the natural corollary and the next step would be an IPO. But to me, that's not the be all and end all of it all. It'll happen because it'll help credibility in an environment that needs credibility, where people want to see companies that have listed. Just gives you a lot more credibility.
How do you stay grounded, Ronnie? Every week or every couple of weeks or every month, there's an article about how great your achievements are, how you're one of the most dynamic entrepreneurs,
I've
how
not read
you've
these
made.
articles. Have you read some of these
I've read
articles?
many of them. That's why I've come prepared. I've
not
had to
read-
do research. I couldn't really call your wife and say, listen, what's Ronnie like, right? I was looking at reports about you and there's nothing negative. And that's, again, very refreshing. It's all positive because I think the world respects first generation entrepreneurs. That's a fact.
Yeah, and I think that,
And you've
that
continued
frugal
to
approach,
sort of-
that lack of, I have to go back to what we started at the beginning with, that total lack of entitlement has stayed with me for my whole life. I think my family upbringing, my background, including my wife and my daughter, that play a continued role what my parents would have played earlier, in just the right kind of balance, that nothing really moves the needle from that point of view. Third, I would say Swades and the Swades Foundation actually is you know, your
Keeps life in
respect
perspective
for
for you.
anyone and everyone around unusual thing is it's just natural. It just comes to you very, very naturally. Which is why I think when my daughter's running her own NGO, it's the same thing. She's extremely grounded.
Okay. Your friends are the same?
Yeah.
Which also keeps a person grounded.
But with the full disclosure that I have very few friends. All my friends are my wife's friends.
You're too busy being...
No, I don't know. I think
you're not a very emotional person.
I have not invested in friendship in that level.
And you're not a very emotional person. You're quite cut and dry and sort of...
I am cut and dry, but that doesn't make me less emotional, but I'm cut and dry. Yeah. So, and in a friendship, you do need that, let's chill, let's do that. So, yeah, I don't drink in that context. So, I'm not making excuses, but yeah, I think I've not invested enough time in friendship.
Lastly, you're shy of 70. Lastly, you're just shy of 70, but the average age of your employee in upGrad is 25, 26.
Sure.
How do you stay so vital and young? How do you keep up with Gen Z? How do you keep up with where the world is going? Do you have a physical and a mental sort of regime that you follow that keeps you there?
Firstly, I don't think people have a choice. You do need to do that. And second, I do it by necessary choice. I think my physical and mental regime today is reasonably disciplined. I'm balanced in terms of a diet. I do spend first 2 hours are a very nice personal hours, workout, but not in a gym. I think it's more of that 1.5 hour walk every day makes a big thing. Drinking 14 glasses of water makes you definitely young.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it does. I think water therapy is an important therapy, but mostly it is to interact with people and being very, very open-minded.
Yeah.
And I think to the third last question you asked me just now, saying how do you remain grounded? I think when you're grounded, you don't look at it from that point of view. Plus, I think whether it's been in media or in education or in Swades, I think I've been blessed enough that the target group with which you're addressing is at a group where you need to be part of and identifiable with them.
Is there a big bash for the 70th? That's going to happen? You
there
haven't
wasn't
thought?
a big bash for the 50th, 60th, so there won't be for the 70th or the 80th.
Ronnie, this is amazing. And you've made a big bash in other ways. So,
Thank you. Thank you for all your kind words, and thank you for a very incisive interview and a lot of very, very detailed probing questions. Lovely.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you very much.